Let's talk about consecutive integers. Now, before we even get into how to solve a consecutive integer word problem, we want to actually first talk about what's a consecutive integer. Well, the word consecutive means in order, so one after another. So in an integer, as you know, these are numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, and -1, -2, -3, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so we're not talking about decimals or fractions or anything like that. So it says in this first example, find two consecutive integers whose sum is 101. Well, what we want to do is this. Before we even get into that problem, what I want to do is kind of look at this list of consecutive integers. And I want to just make an observation. How, if let's say we started with 0, okay, and we're going to move from 0 to this next number. How would you move to that next number? What operation would you have to do, or what would you have to add to 0 to get to here? Well, you would just have to add 1. And what if I were to take from 0 and go to the next number? From here to here. What would you have to do? You would have to add 2. And if I did from 0 to the next number, I would add 3. And that's true for any of these numbers. If I were to start here at -3, how would you go from -3 to -2? You would have to add 1. -3 to -1. You'd have to add 2. Okay, so if you're going to go consecutively from one number to the next, all you have to do is start with one number and add 1, add 2, add 3, etc. So when it says find two consecutive integers whose sum is 101, what we're going to do is we're going to define some variables. So since we're talking about two consecutive numbers, we're going to talk about our first number and our second number. Now our first number, we don't know what that is, so we're just going to talk about in terms of x. Now our next number, up here, when we talked at 0 and we went to the next number, we had to add 1. Or over here, we talked at -3 and we went to the next number, we added 1. So if my first number is x, that means the number right after that will have to be x plus 1. And so it says find the two consecutive integers whose sum is 101. So it's asking you x plus 1. So this number plus this number is 101. Simplify. Subtract 1. Divide by 2. And so x is 50. So if x is 50, that means the next number has to be 51. And does 50 plus 51 add up to 101? Sure does. So the two numbers are 50 and 51. There you go. Now, if we're going to talk about the next one where it says find three consecutive integers, the process is the same. This time, with our variables, we have our first number, our second, and then we'd have our third. So our first number is x. Our next one is x plus 1. And then again, if you go up here, from here to here, you had to add 1. And then from here to here, you had to add 2. So the next one would have to be x plus 2. So the sum is -12. So I do x plus 1 plus x plus 2. So those are my three numbers whose sum is -12. Combine some like terms, I'd end up with 3x plus 3 equals -12. Subtract 3. 3x is -15. Divide by 3, x is -5. So my first number is -5. What's my next number? Well, -5 plus 1, which is -4. And then next one, -5 plus 2 is -3. Now, do -5, -4, -3 add up to -12? They sure do. So the three numbers are -5, -4, and -3. And there you go. Okay, let's try this next one. Okay, this next one says find two consecutive even integers whose sum is 42. Now notice it's saying even this time. So if we're talking about even integers, remember we're talking about numbers like 2, 4, 6, or -2, -4, etc., etc. So this time, if my first number is going to be x, to get to that second number, okay, we don't add 1 to get to this number, rather we add 2. So it would be x plus 2. So I would do two consecutive even integers, so it would be x plus 2 is 42. Simplify, 2x plus 2 is 42. Subtract 2. 2x is 40. If I divide by 2, I'd end up with x is 20. So if x is 20, that means the next one would be 22. And do those two add up to 42? Yes, they do. So my answer, the two numbers are 20 and 22. There you go. So even integer is not terribly difficult. You just add 2 because you're skipping over that odd number every single time. Okay, so we're going to skip over this next one. I want to jump to a different type. And it says, well, we're going to do this fifth one right here, and we'll call it a day. It says, find 3 consecutive odd integers. Okay, now, here's the problem sometimes people have. People tend to confuse this one a little bit because when we did even integers, they said, oh, well, even integers, that's easy enough. We're just going to go through and we're going to add 2 every time because it's even. 2 is even. But odd, let's think about a list of odd numbers. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, -1, -3, etc. Okay, obviously, etc. So if I'm starting with this number right here, how do you go from this number to this number? Well, you add 2. And this number to this number, you would add 4. So even though it's saying odd integers, that has nothing to do with what you're adding because you're skipping over the even number. And so you're adding 2 every time. So when I talk about this problem, it says 3 consecutive odd integers. Our first number is x. Then we have our second and our third. Our next number, we are going to add x plus 2. And the next one, x plus 4. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about even or odd. It's still x, then x plus 2, x plus 4, x plus 6. There is no such thing as x, x plus 1, x plus 3, x plus 5, etc. Okay, so even and odd you treat the same way. So if I'm going to solve this one, it would be x plus 2 plus x plus 4 equals -3. Simplify, I'd get 3x plus 6 equals -3. I would subtract 6. 3x equals -9. Divide by 3. So x equals -3. So my first number is -3. If I add 2, I get -1. And then -3 plus 4 is +1. And are they all odd? Yes. Do they all add up to -3? Yes. So the 3 numbers are -3, -1, and 1. And there you go. That's how you solve consecutive integer word problems.